Well, after another wild day in Washington, which seemed to be the only kind we have these days, it's a great opportunity to sit down and talk with Chuck Todd of NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck, I'm running out of ways to use the word extraordinary, but we have another extraordinary occasion. With the release of this memo, it would seem we've got the White House in open warfare with the Justice Department and with the FBI.
No, we do. I think we have to, is there a way to say extra squared ordinary, right? Extra extraordinary? It is beyond just the simple word of extraordinary. Look, it is, as a political exercise here, I think we see what's happening. This is the president desperately trying to discredit the Mueller probe in any possible way he can. And that's why I think he was so supportive of the disclosure and the declassification of this memo. And so, look, as a political exercise, I think we can see that the president, I think at a minimum, successfully sort of solidified his own supporters and giving them more ammunition to question the investigation. But I have to say, I think this memo was a bit overhyped in sort of the mythology of the memo versus what's actually in it and even what's alleged in it and the basic facts don't quite live up to the hype of somehow this discredits the whole investigation. There's not a single fact of the investigation that gets discredited in here. It is simply a memo that's designed to raise questions and raise suspicions. Some of these questions are very fair questions, including, should the FISA judge know the origin of the Steele dossier, not just the origin of it in the person that puts it together, but who was paying him at the time? Was that fact shared with the judge? The memo hints that the judge didn't know that, but actually doesn't definitively say that. But either way, I think that's a fair question. But that doesn't mean you would have said no. I mean, having a dossier put together by a political opposition is no different than saying having a mob member certainly turn state's evidence, for a lesser deal. So it's not unusual for the FBI to work with questionable sources.
Well, we heard former Michigan Congressman, the former head of the Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, and former FBI agent, I would also point out, say that it obviously took more than that dossier to get a FISA warrant. That it's going to take more than that to get a judge to sign on. But more importantly, that FISA warrant was renewed 3 times, which would suggest that they were having to show progress, that they were getting something out of it.
Well, and not only that, the different people that signed on to the renewal, it's not like it was, you could somehow say, well, there was one rogue person here that kept getting this renewed. At one time it was reviewed by Comey, another time by Christopher Wray, who's now the president's pick for FBI director. One time it was signed by Sally Yates as acting attorney general. Fine, that's an Obama appointee. The next time, though, it's signed by Rod Rosenstein, a Trump appointee. And so it was renewed so many times by so many different actors from both political parties that it does sort of undermine the main thrust of this memo, which says, it was bias and bias alone that simply triggered this investigation.
It was a really interesting answer when the president was asked as he was talking about the release of this, when he was asked about his level of faith, how he was feeling about Rod Rosenstein. And his answer was, well, I'll leave that for you. You can figure that out. Is Rod Rosenstein now dead man walking?
Well, we'll see. He could be. He's the one. Look, if the president wanted to fire Robert Mueller, he can't do it on his own. He can order it. The person that legally would have to do it is the Attorney General. Well, the Attorney General has recused himself in this situation, so it puts it on the Deputy Attorney General, which is Rod Rosenstein. If he refuses and resigns, it would then go to the next person in line, which is Rachel Brand. She's the Associate Attorney General, the number 3 in charge, also a Trump appointee, and frankly with a very similar background and reputation as Rod Rosenstein, sort of a creature of the Justice Department during Republican administrations. And the reason I do it that way is sort of their reputations are as pretty stand-up justice folks who come from the Republican side of the aisle, and there's always a crew of pretty stand-up justice folks that come from the Democratic side of the aisle, sort of almost like careerists of sort, and she's of that ilk. It does indicate that the president at least wants to leave open the possibility of finding a way to fire Mueller. So if he can't fire Mueller himself, maybe he does fire Rosenstein. Which
I don't know where I would go with the word extraordinary then if Mueller were to get fired.
You'd have to add a triple, I guess, is it extraordinary cubed extra cubed ordinary. I don't know. We have to come up with something.
I've only got about a minute left with you, and I wanted to quickly get to an issue that's been fairly closely followed here in the Detroit area with as many immigrant communities as we have here, as robust as they are. Where are we headed, do you suppose, now on DACA? Is it as simple as the Democrats have this choice to make, whereas if they give in on, they may have to give in on the wall if they want to get DACA, and they sort of ask them to put their money where their mouth is? Which is more important to you, getting DACA or not, or shutting down the wall?
Well, I think I think the wall is having to give money for the wall is inevitable. The fact that the Democrats put it on the table once, you know, the Republicans aren't blind on that. The president's not blind. I think the bigger question is the issue of the real dispute is the family reunification rules. Yeah. What the president referred to as chain migration in the State of the Union. That's the sticking point here, Devin. That's what I think the State of the Union made a deal seem less possible, not more possible. I think the way the president sold the immigration deal turned off a lot of Democrats. I don't know. I think it means we're farther away from a deal, not closer.
Yeah. We'll see how far it takes us to get back to that. Chuck, always good to spend some time with you. Thanks very much for the time today.